Chapter 35. The Tennessee Four. The battle line between good and evil runs through the heart of every man. Alexander Solzhenitsyn. Scott Cooper stretched out on the comfortable bed. At the corner of the bed on the floor, handcuffed to the bedpost, was a girl. Occasionally he would hear her sniffle or sob. For the moment, he simply ignored her. They had been traveling for days, hitting farms but not staying long due to the local militias. Damn, but he was tired. He hadn't been sleeping well, and they'd been on the road way too long. Most of the area seemed to have wised up and organized themselves. Memphis had a particularly strong militia in place, which would have been effective, except they were also dealing with a nasty case of cholera. Just north of Dyersburg, they had managed to get a truck. It was a broken-down rust bucket. The engine ran rough, and none of the men knew much about maintenance, so they kept nursing it along, hoping for something better. After they had pushed their way into Tennessee, in late November, 2 men left under the cover of night while on sentry duty. 2 more had died in skirmishes with locals as they navigated through a warren of tiny towns and backwoods hillbillies who were armed to the teeth. By the time Cooper's band entered Memphis, he was down to 19 men. At that point, the women they had had with them in Mississippi were all dead, and 6 of the men who had been too scared to leave now realized they would die no matter what. 4 of them managed to escape into the sprawling ruins of the city, and the other 2 were shot in the back as they ran. 4 more men, a buddy of Riley's, and 3 more grunts were shot by the Memphis militia. This left him with 9 men. He turned and hightailed it out of Memphis, heading northeast up Highway 70. Arlington and Stanton took 2 more of his men, and another was lost on the outskirts of Brownsville. They turned northwest then, passed through Ripley without incident, before losing 1 more on the outskirts to Dyersburg. This left Cooper with Riley, Kimmel, and Eckhart. All of them were bad, all of them tough as nails. They weren't an army any longer, but that was okay in several ways. None of the remaining men were stupid. They were all experienced fighters, and with only 4 men, there wasn't much advertisement to their presence. Try moving 200-plus people through an area and see if someone doesn't notice. 4 men, however, were easily hidden, and it was just the right amount for hitting the isolated farms along the way. The girl gave another hiccuping sob. That annoying sound and the accompanying rumble from his stomach made him sit up. He stood up and pulled his pants on and reached over to the girl. She cowered from him. Her shirt was ripped and bloody, her mouth cut, and the rest of her clothes were gone. Bruises ran up and down her legs. Cooper unlocked the handcuff attached to the bedpost and yanked the girl to her feet.
"Come on. You're going to fix us something to eat."
He dragged her past the other bedrooms where Riley and Kimmel were still busy with the girl's mother, and down the stairs and into the kitchen. The kitchen was all done up in red and white checked curtains, red cabinets, and matching accessories. Above a small table in the kitchen was a plaque that read, "Home Sweet Home," and under that, "Welcome to the Austins." They had taken the house in the evening, shortly after dinner that evening. Under cover of darkness, they had stormed both doors, 2 through the front and 2 in through the back, and the family had been taken unawares, without a shot fired while sitting in the living room. The blood of the menfolk had splashed the floor and the walls and left dark rust-colored drag marks out the front door and down the steps. They had put all the bodies in the old farmhouse, out of sight. Eckhart didn't seem to mind the blood and gore at all. He was snoring contentedly on the couch, his pants off. Apparently, he'd gotten first dibs on the mother. Cooper hadn't bothered asking. The others knew the girl was his, and his alone until such a time as he tired of her. This time might come soon if she didn't stop her damned whining. He kicked Eckhart as he passed him, and the man jumped awake, a sharp hunting knife materializing in his hand. Disconcerted and still in the throes of his dream, he snarled at Cooper. Scott just laughed.
"Find me a chain for her,"
he ordered, pointing to the girl. Eckhart sheathed his knife and walked away, muttering under his breath. A few minutes later, a cold, rusty chain had been attached to the handcuff. The other end of the chain had been wrapped around a column that stood between the kitchen and the dining room and locked in place with a padlock. Cooper slid the key into his khakis and sat down in the living room. Morning was dawning. He had worked up an appetite, and after he ate, he wanted to sleep. The area was remote. They were 2 miles or so out of town, and there was plenty of cover of trees. He set his feet up on the couch, motioned to Eckhart to keep an eye on the girl in the kitchen, and settled back. Cooper closed his eyes and smiled. They could afford to take a break for a few days, maybe even a couple of weeks. By now they had learned the trick of it. It had actually become rather easy to take the locals by surprise. Just hit them at dusk when their defenses are down, and it's too dark to go running through the woods when you couldn't see where you were going. From the kitchen, he could hear the girl cry out as Eckhart moved in and pressed her against the countertop. His hands groped her.
"Leave her be, Saul,"
Scott called out without opening his eyes.
"I want some good old Southern cooking in me. You'll get a turn at that before too long anyway."
He ignored the man's mutterings as the sounds in the kitchen turned back to cooking. An hour later, as he gulped down the biscuits and gravy the girl had served up, he smiled. Maybe they'd stay for a while.